Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos podcast, and we are excited because we are weeks, should I say now, from the start of NFL training camp, or in this case, the Denver Broncos training camp. So we are going to, starting today, we are going to be doing a position by position breakdown for you, going through all the different positions. And it just really made a lot of sense that in this kind of case of looking at the Denver Broncos, obviously it's smart to lump the quarterback in there. But one of the things that we just felt like it was smart to do was you're gonna do running backs, you're gonna do wide receivers, you're gonna leave the tight ends kind of high and dry. So we just figured, you know what, we'll talk about the tight end group along with the wide receivers, running backs, and and of course the quarterback, because it may end up starting and ending with, of course, the conversation of Russell Wilson. Before we begin, once again, if you guys are watching this on Twitter, one, we appreciate you guys are watching this, but two, your comments, if you are contributing, cannot be shown on this stream. So unfortunately, you will have to jump over to the MHRT network page of YouTube, and then you guys can watch it from there. Or if you guys have the Manely Broncos Facebook page, you guys can go over there, as well as the MHRT Network Facebook page. You guys can go over there and chime in on the comments, and your comments then will be shown on these streams. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And Brandon, how are you doing, buddy? I will say, obviously, you look exhausted, but I do have to ask you one question, and that is, now that you're drafted by the Charlotte Hornets, what are you anticipating to do with the money now that you are drafted to the Charlotte Hornets?
Oh, man, I'm gonna buy my mom a house. I feel like that's, I have to. I have to do that. I'm gonna buy myself a house. Nothing too crazy. Maybe just like a 3-bedroom condo. Just a nice upgrade, but nothing too crazy. And then, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put the rest of the money, I'm going to split it between like my retirement. Then I'm just going to put the rest of it in an ETF and let it sit there. That's my goal. That's my plan. But no, I just came from my 2-a-days at the NBA. No, actually, I just spent 2 hours. I just spent 2 hours trying to solve the world's hardest level of Tetris, which is moving an oversized couch into a third floor apartment with the world's smallest staircase.
Moving is fun, isn't it?
We didn't get it.
Oof.
And it's just giving me great vibes because I'm going to have to move in a couple months. And this was not me. This was a friend of mine, but I'm going to be the one moving next. And I hate this. I hate it.
Moving's fun, isn't it?
This is why I said my goal is I'm going to buy myself a house. I'm going to buy a house with gigantic French doors that is the easiest thing in the world to move things into. And then I'm never leaving. I'm going to live there until I die.
It is, I think I've been in my place for about like 4.5 years now. But like I was just like, I told my parents, it was just one of those things, like I knew exactly where I wanted to be, and I had no plan on moving, anytime soon. And so it's just it is such a hard thing. It's hard on you. It's hard to move, the whole entire day is rough. It is tedious, there's also a reward in it, obviously, but of course, it is exhausting with a capital E.
I will say, that was one of the best pumps I've ever, I literally got home and I literally, my shirt was like 85% sweat, 15% cat hair. And that's it. And I just got home and I took my shirt off and I dunked my head in a the sink and just like ran cold water over it. And then I took my head out of the sink and I should go to the beach or something right now. Like I am pumped. Like I look good. I mean, I don't feel good. I do not feel good, but I am incredibly jacked right now. I mean, that's the one benefit is I don't think I've ever had that much of a pump. And like, I've done some crazy workouts. That was horrendous.
Yeah. How are you guys doing? It looks like a Big E Bronco is in the chat, and one of our favorite guys, Clayton, obviously, smash that like button is in the chat. Of course, so thank you guys so much. D-Rock is in the house. Thank you for stopping by. Yeah, it is definitely one where it is like I will say, like, for instance, like if you haven't worked out during the week, you're glad you're moving, because like that feels like not just a workout, but that is like an entire day's workout. Or
well,
like
yesterday was my rest day. Although, like, this is why I have a problem. Like, I freely admit this. I have a problem. I probably am certifiably a masochist. I did upper body day on Monday, and I was thinking, yeah, I'll be fine. Well, no, let me back up for a minute. I rock climbed for 3 hours on Saturday. Sunday. Then I did upper body day on Monday. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. Then yesterday I was like, okay, it's my rest day. I'm not going to go lift, but I'm a glutton for punishment. I was like, you know what? My fat ass has sat here for too long. I have to go do something. So I went and ran a mile. My knees are feeling it today, but like I probably lost 4 pounds in the past 3 days.
Imagine feeling so bored, like Forrest Gump, and just being, you know what? I'm going to go run a mile today.
I got to get more water, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, you already downed like the entire glass. But anyway, yeah, we have an exciting show for you today. So we are going to be talking about the quarterback position for any of the new people that are chiming in just now. We're going to be doing the quarterback position, the running back position, the wide receiver position, of course, the tight end position. We all know that it's probably going to end up starting and ending in terms of the conversation piece with Russell Wilson. But there is a lot to certainly discuss in terms of this skill room, because as something that we've talked about before, even before joining, the should I say the MHRT network team, we've talked about it before about how the wide receiver room is also a big boom and bust team, like a big boom and bust team in terms of position groups. And so what
before we jump into this, this just gave me an idea. I'm going to combine this topic with last week's topic. Take those 4 positions. Who is your Mount Rushmore of those 4 skill positions? I mean, I feel like it's very obvious to a point. Shannon Sharp, Terrell Davis. I mean,
you're talking not obviously the current roster.
No, all time. Well, I mean, all time. It wouldn't work for the current roster.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Shannon Sharp, Terrell Davis, John Elway. I think I have to go John Elway.
It would depend on. It depends on, again, our qualifications of it, right? So like it would depend on.
I mean, it hurts my soul, but
right.
So yeah, he was
probably Elway, right? Elway, Shannon, Terrell. Now wide receiver.
Wide receiver is where it gets weird.
I think wide receiver is where it's going to be a little bit interesting. And now, granted,
Rod Smith.
There's Rod Smith, maybe the greatest undrafted free agent of all time and the best undrafted free agent in Broncos history. Should be a Hall of Famer. And then there's also Demaryius Thomas, right? And so then there's Demaryius Thomas, and obviously I'm wearing the Demaryius Thomas t-shirt. Selfishly, I will say Demaryius Thomas is my favorite wide receiver in Denver Broncos history. I think he's the best wide receiver in Broncos history. But given where things are probably currently are statistically, you may have to give the edge, I think, to Rod. But if you were to ask truly my opinion, I would probably say Demaryius Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can't give it to Rod.
Yeah.
But Demaryius Thomas is like, you can easily put him in the conversation, and I'm not even mad if you choose to put him there.
Yeah. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people on Twitter in terms of Demaryius Thomas, but you go back and you look at about a 5-year span with Demaryius Thomas, obviously with Peyton Manning, there may not have been a more productive and dominant wide receiver in that stretch of years than Demaryius Thomas. I mean, I still think back to his game that he had against the Arizona Cardinals, where Antonio Cromartie and Patrick Peterson were all just draped over him the entire game. And he just ate their lunch the entire game. Like it didn't even matter who they had on him.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that all of these players were on the team at the same time is kind of insane.
Yeah. But I agree. I mean, Rod Smith had to work for it. I mean, when you're an undrafted free agent, you have to work to be that special player. You have to be doing the dirty work on special teams. You have to be, Terrell Davis was that same way. I mean, you think back to his most famous hit on the kickoff. And then like after that moment was when everything truly just came to the forefront in terms of, his stardom, if you will, with the Denver Broncos and him really earning that playing time for the Broncos and in that backfield.
Is Rod Smith the best undrafted player of all time?
I think so, personally.
Like in the sport?
Yeah. And I personally feel, and I know that I've had this opinion on social media too, but it's like, because obviously I feel that Demaryius Thomas is the best wide receiver, in Broncos history. I'm not sliding Rod Smith in that, knowing the fact that both Rod Smith and Demaryius Thomas deserve their time in the sun, and both deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. They deserve to be in Canton. So, all right. So what do you want to start with first? Do you want to start with do you want to start where it currently leads off, if you will, as far as the crux of the conversation? You want to save that for last, or do you want to just dive a little bit into some of the playmakers a little bit?
Do you want to start with the hard thing or the easy thing? Do you want to eat the frog?
Let's save that for last, because I feel like that has the chance to dominate a lot of the conversation.
Okay.
Let's save that for last.
To know if we're talking about the same thing, actually, but
in terms of the quarterback position, just previewing the quarterback position, and so that's kind of where I was going with it.
That's almost the easy. It's the easy and the weird.
Yeah.
Young and the restless, but the easy and the weird. Anyway,
since we're talking about wide receivers, I tell you what. Since we're talking about wide receivers,
let's start with wide receivers.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting wide receiver room. Like, I feel like I've said this almost every year. It's just the potential of the room is incredibly high, but also how high is the floor? That's really what I want to know. I mean, Jerry Jeudy, I think, is pretty clearly the one. Maybe, I mean, although I would say
maybe not clearly,
nothing against,
but he is a one.
I think it's pretty clear, to be honest. Nothing against Courtland Sutton, recency bias, injuries, and all that. Would you, let's say that Jerry Jeudy wasn't the one, would you entertain that Tim Patrick is the one?
Yes.
Over Courtland Sutton?
Yes, I would.
Okay, because that's where I was going with that. I wasn't even thinking, and again, I love Courtland Sutton, but I was saying, I still say Jerry Jeudy is the one, but I was comparing him to Tim Patrick, not Courtland Sutton. And I'm not even, not to say Courtland Sutton is the 3, but that's how high the ceiling of this wide receiver room is. But again, just the floor is so unknown, I guess is the best term. I mean, Jerry Jeudy has had those flashes, and I think if he gets a good quarterback, well, okay, let me back up. He gets a good coach, and the coach fixes the quarterback, and he gets at least even if Russell Wilson is
a top 12,
30% better than he was last year, which is like not even that good, to be honest with you. Jerry Jeudy's having
enough.
a good season. If he's 80% of the old Russell Wilson, Jerry Jeudy is like, I don't know the best way to kind of explain this other than saying like I would take him in probably the 6th round of the fantasy draft and I'd win the league with that. That's a league winner in the 6th round right there.
And the thing is like the reason why I was taking the objective approach was because of the Tim Patrick part. Because I think that,
Tim Patrick is just Mr. Consistent.
And I think that there was a lot of reports, James Palmer has reported this, that dating back to last season before the injury, if you were to ask a lot of people within the organization, Tim Patrick was the number one wide receiver in that room, not Jerry Jeudy, not Cortland Sutton. It was Tim Patrick. And so basically what I was trying to say is like the number one player also that Wilson would even target in practices before that injury was Tim Patrick. And so I think that, when you give
and losing Tim Patrick literally just was so bad for that offense.
And if we're going to kind of correlate and if we're going to kind of correlate it a little bit to the Denver Nuggets per se, look what happened the very first time the core players were all healthy in one season. MPJ, Jamal Murray, those two players in particular, when they were finally healthy, you got maybe one of the greatest teams, obviously, the NBA has ever seen. We've never even had that opportunity to even see a starting 5 unit, top to bottom, be there for a full season, and we haven't even mentioned guys like a KJ Hamler. And I think that that's even the thing of like what can even boost a team like this even more is because you have that opportunity with a couple players to really bring up that ceiling even more, right? So I think that when you look at it like guys like KJ Hamler, a Marvin Mims, those two players in particular could really help bring out that room. And who knows certainly what's going to happen with Montreal Washington in his second year. You feel like he's on the outs a little bit, obviously, given, of course, the addition of Marvin Mims and, and maybe even Kendall Hinton for that matter as well. But I will say that it would not – this is exactly what I was going to bring up, and D-Rock just brought it up, if you want to pull it up. But we may actually get a full season of them together, say Sutton, TP, Jeudy, and maybe Hamler. But I would not.
Season? Do you think this is the last dance?
But this very well could be the last dance in terms of all of them together. And what I mean by, I wonder if it could end up being KJ Hamler as either like a trade bait wide receiver, or a very surprise bubble candidate in this.
I think KJ Hamler is. I love KJ.
Mm-hmm.
Like, full respect. I think he's very much on the bubble. Like his seat is nuclear.
And it actually felt that way with the Marvin Mims selection to a certain extent, right? And because Marvin Mims, and we said it before, like Marvin Mims was a player that was like, he was like the nice little blend of, well, I should say I said it in the sense of like Brandon Cooks and Brandon Lloyd in a certain extent. But even then, like he adds that speed element, right? And so a guy like that can then take the top off and be that reliable of a pass catcher. It's definitely tempting, and he's younger, and he's a draft pick that Sean Payton invested in.
Well,
right?
Yeah. The guy that I'm really interested in seeing specifically at OTAs, actually, Marquez Callaway. Because Marquez Callaway is, I think, can have a bigger role in this offense than I've seen people mention. He knows what Sean Payton likes to do on the offensive side of the ball. He's kind of like that veteran presence. He's going to know the routes. He's going to know the terminology. He's going to know the outs. He's going to know like the route stems. He's going to know like exactly what he needs to do on any given play. Whereas these other guys, I mean, I think they're going to get there, but I think he's the one that knows it now. And if we start out the season a little shaky, or we start out OTAs, we go through OTAs, and like people are struggling to get the playbook down, and I don't know if Sean Payton's like kind of offense is known for being like, because you have those coaches out there that like they have the incredibly complex playbooks that are like really famously difficult to learn. I don't really know what Sean Payton's, I guess, reputation in that realm is, but I feel like Marquez Callaway, like if you get the guys that, if they're not firing on all cylinders right away, Marquez Callaway can just kind of come in, and he's almost like, you can almost put Marquez Callaway and Tim Patrick are
and that Mr. Reliable,
very similar in the Mr. Reliable role of just like, they're going to do what you need them to do, and they're going to get open, and you can throw them the ball, and they're going to get you 700 yards and 6 touchdowns.
So this goes into, and it's a nice little follow-up in both these comments. So Big E says Cortland will have 1,400 next year, Jerry 1,200, Tim P 800, and everybody else combined for 600. And then D-Rock will just ask a question: will Jerry eclipse 1,000? Well, so I will say
Russ is throwing for 4,000 yards.
So I will say this: like I think that, and I've kind of held true on this, prediction. You know what's coming because you've heard me say it before. But at some point, it's got to ring true. And now with Sean Payton in the building, Brandon, I truly feel this is the year Jerry Jeudy will lead the entire wide receiver room in yardage. So I think Jeudy will lead the team in yardage. And it's a toss-up between Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick between receiving touchdowns. I will say Tim Patrick leads the team in touchdowns. Very quickly, a little bit followed by Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton on that. Because it just depends on Jerry Jeudy and especially when he gets open, and he's the kind of player that is like made for this kind of offense, if you will. It wouldn't surprise me if, and I should say this, I'm talking strictly from the wide receivers, because there's a true wild card that could be leading the team in touchdowns, and we'll get to that position group in a little bit. But
I will say, just to not to play devil's advocate, because I truly believe this, but I just no filter. I think you're going to be a little disappointed, Big E. I'm sorry to say it. I just feel like I love this energy, and I think Jerry Jeudy, honestly, Jerry Jeudy 1,200, I wouldn't be totally shocked.
I wouldn't be disappointed. Yeah.
I think we're going to be passing the ball 30% less than this is projecting. Like, we're not passing the ball this much. We're going to run it to the ground. Like, ground game, ground game, ground game, ground game. Honestly, like I've been saying it. I think we're going to continue to do it. I'll continue to say it. I think we're going to do it. Chris Manhertz was brought in. Incredible run blocker, right?
So,
literally, like, that is his entire role is coming in as run blocker, which I know we'll talk about tight ends, but I don't know. I just feel like it's going to be very run heavy, and I don't think you're going to have the passing volume needed to hit a stat line like that. I do think Jerry Jeudy is probably going to be the leader in yards. I think he might even be the leader in touchdowns, maybe. Although I still feel like it could be Tim Patrick. And then you have to give Marquez Callaway his probably like 600 yards that he's just going to get. Between that, though, I don't see the passing volume being there.
Yeah, and I think that
but I love the enthusiasm.
But I will say, I think if you were to kind of create, say, a logical standpoint, because obviously, like the hot takers, I think would say, the Broncos will have 3 1,000-yard receivers. But I will say, if there is a more likely scenario, it would be probably the case of two receivers being above 1,000 yards, right? Now the question and then becomes, is it Cortland Sutton or is it Tim Patrick? Because Jerry Judy's, in my opinion,
over
Jerry
1,000
Judy.
yards.
Yeah, does Cortland get over 1,000 or does Tim Patrick get over 1,000 yards? Because that's the so
you're saying Jerry Judy's getting over 1,000 regardless, right?
Oh, I think Jerry's getting.
Then beyond that, who's the other person?
Right, exactly.
Is it crazy is it insane if I say no one?
No, because I think that having two receivers over 1,000 yards is the ceiling. I think with the way that the offense is constructed, that goes back to what you just said with the running game. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it might be like you get JJ gets.
I will say
1,100, and then maybe you get Cortland gets 7, Marquez Callaway gets 7.
That's what I was just gonna say. That I would not
Marvin
be
Mims
surprised.
Gets 350
or 4. But I would not be AJ surprised.
Hamler, don't know.
I was just gonna say I would not be surprised though if you were to ask me,
Patrick
and
gets 8.
No, I was gonna say is that like if Marquez Callaway has more yardage than Cortland Sutton, I wouldn't necessarily. I would be very disappointed per se with that. But given the comfortability and the reliability and potentially what could happen in camp, I think that it's pretty evident what could happen with.
Thank you, nobody, Mr. Nobody,
Mr. Nobody. I wouldn't be surprised, and I think a lot of naysayers will probably look at that and be like, "Wow, Marquez Callaway has more yardage than Cortland Sutton," and maybe that's an ode of potentially looking on the outside of looking in terms of like Cortland Sutton's future with the Broncos, but it just depends on how the way things get currently constructed. But I wouldn't even be surprised if. Like, I don't agree with it, but I can see something like that, because if we're talking Mr. Reliability in Tim Patrick and Callaway, I wouldn't be surprised, if
I just think Marquez Callaway is going to come and he's going to know the system. He's going to know what Sean Payton wants to do. Sean Payton's going to trust him. He's going to be the veteran presence. I just don't know like where Tim Patrick is in his recovery from this injury. Like, I know it's been quite a while, and at this point he should easily be 100%. Like, but who know? I don't know. He's also it's been a minute since he's just had a meaningful snap. I mean, it might take some time for him to kind of get his legs back under him, if you will. So it could even be that like in the first game, Marquez Callaway might have the most receiving yards in the game. I don't think it's going to stay that way for the rest of the season. But like at all. I mean, Jerry Jeudy, I think is going to come in. Like, that's a hot take on my part. I would not be surprised at all if Jerry Jeudy just tears it up. I hope Cortland Sutton proves me wrong. I would be so happy if Cortland Sutton comes in and just goes nuclear and proves me wrong, because that would be amazing.
And I will say,
it's just like it's so very hard to like the ceiling is there. Like, where is the ceiling? I guess the ceiling isn't there. Where is the ceiling? We don't know where the ceiling is. The ceiling is so high up, I can't see it. But also, I feel like I'm dangling over a bottomless pit because I don't know where the floor is.
And I will say, and if there is two players,
do we throw to the running back too? Because like that's a whole other thing. Go ahead.
Right, but I was going to say is like if there's two players or two position groups, that you will probably be looking at all pros at the end of next year. Obviously, we know there's going to be one probably on the defensive side of things, but this is my bold hot take prediction. But I would not be surprised if Jerry Jeudy is a second team All Pro at the end of this upcoming season. Like,
if Jerry Jeudy is second team All Pro, either Russell Wilson gets much better or Jerry Jeudy goes insane. And I'd be very happy with either, but I'd be more happy with, not to take it away from Jerry Jeudy, but like if Russell Wilson gets back to even marginally close to what he was before.
Keep in mind
I could definitely see that happening, and I would be very happy.
Keep in mind too, like we're also entering a contract year for Jared Jeudy.
Sure,
and we all know,
sure.
and we all know sometimes when players are in a contract year, they always really play, the best they've ever played, and especially considering the confidence that Jeudy played with at the half of last season, like it wouldn't shock me in the least personally. And I know that that's a biased take and look at that, saying that Jeudy, probably is going to, or could be, I should say, could be an All-Pro by the end of 2023's season, but I wouldn't be surprised by that. So now, looking at guys, so if we're to look strictly at formulating the wide receiver room in terms of the training camp and the roster that they're going to construct before we move on to running backs and tight ends here, I would not be surprised if the Denver Broncos have 6, maybe 7 wide receivers in the room. And I know that sounds kind of insane a little bit, but in terms of when I say 7, but I wouldn't be surprised if I'm saying 6 right now, but like I wouldn't be surprised if it's 7.
So right now we have 8. So I mean, I think who do you have then? Because
obviously, right?
We have more than 8. We have 12. What am I doing? So who do you have staying then? Because Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Marquez Callaway, Marvin Mims, KJ Hamler.
That's 6, right?
Montrell Washington, like whoever wins the punt, the return job.
Yeah, I think that it could end up being
Brandon Johnson. I think it could be. I think
Jalen Virgil.
Get more. I think we have more receivers. Well, maybe, but then that kind of flies in the face of like what I was talking about with the passing volume. I think that'll be actually an interesting thing to look at, is depending on how many receivers we keep. I mean, I think that'll give us a better idea on.
So, like I said, I'm saying 6 right now.
The way that this is going, because like you look at tight end. I know we're not a tight end yet. Do we keep all 4 of these tight ends? Like I don't see a situation where we don't.
However, right?
Like Dulcich is like obviously staying. Alberto is maybe the who knows. Chris Manhertz was brought in for a very specific reason. Adam Trotman was brought in for a very specific reason in his familiarity with Sean Payton.
Oh, and by the way, there's also Little Jordan Humphrey, who's a wide receiver / tight end. And so are they going to be bringing him and keeping him on the roster? So it's just like, yeah, it's a rare. I don't know. It's an interesting one to look at. But so I'm currently saying 6, Brandon, right now before training camp. But I wouldn't be surprised if it gets pushed to 7. So what do you think in terms of the wide receiver room?
I'm switching to my headset here because I'm going to have to go get more liquid nutrition. But it's so hard because like who's the return guy, right? Like who wins that role? Is it Montrell again? I don't know.
Because they also said Marvin Mims could be,
they said Marvin Mims could be that guy for sure.
Clayton.
I think you have to have more. I think you have to have 7 or 8, honestly, because but that sounds insane to me. It sounds insane to me when I say that out loud. But like Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, Marvin Mims, Marquez Callaway, those are like probably obvious locks. Unless could KJ Hamler be a camp cut this year? Because that changes things.
Yeah.
Because then beyond that, like Kendall Hinton, who knows? Practice squad, maybe. Lil Jordan Humphrey, who knows? Brandon Johnson, Jalen Virgil, there's some potential there. Montrell Washington. Like, do you want to have a rookie be your return man and then not? Like, let's say he's a return man and then he starts to slip a little bit. Who do you swap out for him?
The other thing, too, is with guys like Jalen Virgil, with guys like Jalen Virgil and, say, Brandon Johnson, you could also use your undrafted free agent, or sorry, the undrafted practice squad part of that. Like, you could stash them on the practice squad.
Well, you can, but do they? I mean, they get poached.
Could, yeah, could. And so you would almost have to protect them, because I think that you can protect them on a weekly basis, or there's a certain limit or something about like how many you can protect, or how many times you can protect them, I should say, before before putting them back on the 53-man roster. And sometimes like teams do that, like they'll bring a player up because they don't want to lose him, and because the moment that they feel like they're getting ready to lose him is when they bring him up. So I wouldn't be surprised if, say, Jalen Virgil is like the practice squad type of guy where they keep him stashed. I don't feel the same about Brandon Johnson per se. But yeah, so I'm saying Virgil will be a stash away. And then yeah, so I like it again. I'm saying 6. I'm saying 6, and then that may change.
I'm gonna say 7.
Okay, that's.
But I might regret it, because that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah. All right. So now let's go on the outside as well, if you will, for some of those other pass catchers. Let's go to that tight end room. I tell you,
4 of these guys stay on this roster. I'm telling you right now, none of these tight ends are going to cut, except for maybe Alberto. Alberto. They must have like. He has to have, like, either they have. I don't even know. He's like lives in the doghouse. He has to have dirt on George Payton or something. I don't know. Like, I literally don't know, because he seemed like he was kind of popping off a little bit, or like on the road to being a little bit of a weapon for you, and then he kind of just like disappears. Was that just the complete incompetence of the previous coaching staff?
Yeah.
Was that like, I don't know, because Greg Dulcich is not. He's basically a tight end 1, probably. I mean, it's probably a 3-way race right now, but I would be surprised if he's not your tight end 1, at least at some point in the season. So he's obviously not going anywhere.
So I was going to say, in terms of Alberto, I wouldn't be surprised or even had the inclination that it's the coaching staff doghouse, because, obviously they drafted Dulcich, with their pick last year, but they kind of needed a tight end. The question was just who, and the question was who are they going to go get and who are they going to go target? And they went out and got Greg Dulcich, and then it became, during the regular season, pretty evident. It seemed like he was in the doghouse with the coaching staff, with how Dulcich got hurt, and in the first few weeks of the season, Alberto was inactive a couple weeks into the season, and then the time when Dulcich got activated off of IR, he starts, and Okuwebunam is inactive. Like, and Alberto is inactive again. So but then you fast forward to later on that season with Jerry Rosberg taking the helm and taking the reins from Nathaniel Hackett. Then you're kind of looking at it from the standpoint of, he played pretty well. He got a touchdown pass from Russell Wilson in that Kansas City Chiefs game, a pretty nice touchdown pass from Russell Wilson to Alberto. He looked good. So it might have been a case where, the Alberto was kind of in the doghouse in terms of the coaching staff. So, but again, like, I feel like it's like in college recruiting, Brandon, like you really have to impress the new coach in order for you to really prove your worth, that you belong on this team, right? In a certain extent, because like in terms of like Alberto, and I say that in terms of like players that are vying for a spot on this roster, because like guys like Alberto, especially, you have to have the training camp and the preseason of your life. And I think that that's the other part of this, given, determining whether there's going to be 6 wide receivers, how good will Russ be, so on and so forth. But, the fact that we are actually going to be seeing the players and the significant players play in preseason will really help dictate us determine who is going to be on the final man roster, from our vantage point. And I think that's the part I'm really excited about. So, but yeah, so Greg Dulcich, I'm really excited about Greg Dulcich. Something we talked about too in terms of like Jerry Jeudy. I really like the idea of Greg Dulcich within this offense, and if they're able to keep Albert Okwuegbunam, you're talking about 2 guys in a dynamic room that you can use within this offense for Sean Payton. And also, if they are able to keep those 4 tight ends to what we were saying, Brandon, you will have the ability to mix and match Dulcich on mismatch opportunities the way that, say, like a Andy Reid would scheme up a Travis Kelce, right? I'm not comparing Dulcich to Kelce, but it's like you could use those kinds of things to your advantage and mismatches and use Dulcich to that type of level to where he can see that productivity. And to call back on us talking about wide receivers, it would not be surprising, and this was my wild card, if Greg Dulcich leads the team in touchdowns, not Courtland Sutton or Tim Patrick.
I mean, it's pretty hot. That would be very interesting. So, I mean, do you think we're keeping all 4 of these tight ends? Because I feel like that's literally the only option.
Well, okay, so I mean, obviously there's the little Jordan Humphrey, who was the wide receiver tight end who came from the Saints. The question is just
he's officially listed as a wide receiver, though.
Right. So the question is just, when the Broncos actually view it, are they going to view him as a tight end? Because then in that case,
you think they'd have 5 tight ends? I don't, but I don't think they're not going to get rid. Do you get rid of any of these 4 main guys? Because I don't know.
Right.
Maybe Alberto. Maybe he's like so far in the doghouse that it's like,
well, and that
unrecoverable. But he would have had to do some crazy shit to do that, because I literally don't know who you got.
Well, and the thing
Adam
is,
Trautman was brought in from the Saints. Sean Payton basically drafted him. Chris Manhertz brought in to run block.
Played with him before.
And then you got your 2 weapons.
Yeah. And I think that's why, like, if you were to ask me, who is a likely candidate, it's Alberto, because of the simple fact that what Greg Dulcich gives you is 10 times more efficient and productive than what Alberto can bring. Now, he's
does he though? Because we haven't really seen enough to say that.
But based on what we saw from last year, and I think the talent level of Alberto, he's an exceptional talent. But I think that when he had
bad quarterback,
right?
Bad coaching, and then bad coaching and a bad quarterback.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, also with the fact that you look at it from, I think that what Dulcich can also offer you, Alberto can also offer you the same thing. And so I think too, it's going to call back to, I think, just maybe who they look at, like, as far as who's going to fit it. But I think that, I don't know. I like the idea of having both, but because there's 2 necessarily of the same tight end, it would necessarily fit the person that's on the way out. It's kind of like how I will look at that.
Do you think Greg Dulcich could be an Alberto replacement?
Yeah, exactly. Not to say that he was not an Alberto replacement last year. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's 4. And I think that we shouldn't be shocked if in the initial depth chart, like in the initial release, the one that's like, it's a blah depth chart, right? That's usually what it is, Brandon. Like, it's a blah depth chart. I wouldn't be surprised if Dulcich is not tight end 1 on the depth chart, on like the first official depth chart. And that wouldn't surprise me,
Could be.
But like, and I mean, like, if Troutman's tight end 1, right? Like
I feel like I'd be less surprised if Troutman's tight end 1, and then Greg Dulcich kind of earns it at some point in the season.
Yeah,
it's the same reason with Marquez Callaway. He knows the offense. He's familiar with Sean Payton. Sean Payton basically drafted him. He's a bit more. He's not a veteran, but he's 26.
So
he's been in the league more.
To circle back on what you said, though, I will say, how many tight ends did we keep last year? Was it 3? I think it was 3. I will say 3 tight ends. I will say 3 tight ends. With Manhurts, Troutman, and Dulcich. I will say 3.
How can I not find last year's roster?
Well, I mean, you may actually see like the 4. Who's 4?
Tomlinson. We had Tomlinson, Salbert, Alberto, Greg Dulcich.
Okay. Maybe 4 again. Yeah, maybe 4. So, I mean, and in that case, you're looking at maybe Alberto staying, or they switch positions for Humphrey and give him the tight end, So, but I will say 3 initially, and that's just my initial take. And kind of just let the other stuff come after that. So I will say 3. Now, the running back position. The running back position.
Do fullbacks not matter to you?
We will add a fullback in there. But at the same time, it's like,
am I a joke to you?
Okay.
Michael Burton saying that.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, are fullbacks considered skill positions?
I was just giving you shit. Go for
it. No. But I'm just kind of like thinking to myself, I'm like, are fullbacks skill positions? I guess it depends. I guess it just depends on, what team you're with, right? Because I mean, like, if you were the San Francisco 49ers, yes, the fullback position is a skill position with Kyle Juszczyk.
We're talking about a professional sport. Every position is a skill position. Okay, I couldn't be the kicker, even if I had to pay them to let me do it. I'm not skilled enough to be a kicker.
Yeah.
And I don't skip leg day, but I still can't kick for shit. I think everything's a skill position. I'm just kidding. I was just giving you shit.
No, you're cool. This is where I didn't want to bring up Dalvin Cook again, but this is the case where because the thing is still in flux. Like, he's deciding between Miami, and according to Tom Pelissero, the Broncos are in the mix. Like, the Broncos are in the mix for Dalvin Cook. So now if there's one Broncos reporter that we can trust, it's been Tom Pelissero because of the connections with, it seems like, George Payton, if you will.
Yeah, but he's also made it pretty clear that he wants to play on a contender.
And I mean,
does he view us as a contender?
Kareem Jackson said the same thing on Good Morning Football, and he re-signs with the Broncos.
I guess.
Anyway, looking at the running back position, obviously it is going to be Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, and then maybe Tony Jones. Like, maybe Tony Jones is going to be lumped a little bit into that.
I mean, I feel like you have to have a third initially because of just the question mark of Javonte Williams.
And I think that this is where you get the question marks. So say they don't sign Dalvin Cook, which I think is far more likely than, them actually signing him. This is, I think, where guys like Jaleel McLaughlin and Tyler Batty are really going.
But I'm going to call him Batty from now on.
I'm going to say Batty because he's a baddie.
Oh my God.
But anyway, the the point is though is like I think that for him, there are those two players. Those I think are players that are really going to excite fans and maybe even excite a guy like a Sean Payton to where you slide one or two of them on, right? Maybe at least one. And so then you're talking about a room of Javonte, Samaje, Tony Jones, and then Jaleel McLaughlin, right? Or Tyler Beatty.
Didn't we officially cut McLaughlin?
I don't know. I actually hadn't seen anything like that, but I know the Beatty is definitely one that is still there.
So I can't find the info on it. I mean, this one's fairly obvious. I mean, Samaje Perine is going to be your starter going into the season. Obviously, I mean, Javonte Williams is kind of back, but how back is that really? I mean, I'm kind of surprised to see him back so soon. I definitely thought it would be a much longer recovery for him because that was a fairly significant injury. It almost scares me to see him come back so early. Like, don't rush it, man. I'd rather ride Samaje for a couple weeks and make sure that Javonte is good to go. Just it'll make it a better 1-2 punch. He'll have fresher legs. And then Tony Jones, like, I wonder, like, what the plan there is for him. I mean, I feel like he was on the Saints, so like they're kind of just doing the whole bring in whatever Saints player is available that has familiarity in the offense, really.
And Seahawks.
I know he was on the Seahawks for a year too, but or at least a little bit. But he was also on the Saints for 3 years, technically, officially. So maybe there's just something there that Sean Payton sees. Maybe Sean Payton was the guy that pounded the table for Tony Jones. Because, I mean, he really hasn't had that many career. He's had 67 career rushes, and 54 of them came in 2021. So you really haven't seen him do anything. Maybe Sean Payton just is like, yeah, this is my guy. I see something in the diamond in the rough here with him, because he's a big guy. He's 5'11", 225, which, I mean, like, for a running back being almost 6 foot, is pretty big. I mean, I know Samaje Perine is also in kind of that same vicinity. We're trying to get some bowling balls in here, just like run through everyone.
Right.
So he's kind of built that same way, but maybe Sean Payton is just like, yeah, this is my guy. I want to keep him around.
According to our lad,
a little bit with catching the ball in the backfield, just like slightly.
According to our lads, and obviously this is not the official depth chart for, for the Broncos, but they have the 4 that's listed: Javonte, Samaje, Beatty, Jones, and McLaughlin. Is that 4? No, that's 5.
Yeah, I don't see McLaughlin on. I'm looking at the ESPN one, which again might not be accurate, but I'm not seeing him on here.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be, but the thing is, like, those are the kinds of players. And again, like, if you look at it from the running back perspective, they didn't draft anyone.
I mean, it's weird to me. It's honestly weird to me that we don't have more. And this is why I wonder, like, what Sean Payton sees in someone like Jones, because I feel like, again, if we're going to be leaning as heavily on the run game as I'm anticipating that we're leaning heavily on the run game, you're going to be working Samaje Perine a lot, at least initially, because unless you, like, I don't think Sean Payton's the kind of guy that would want to try to rush Javonte Williams back out there unless he knows he's 100% ready and healthy. So you're going to be seeing a lot of Samaje Perine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think Samaje Perine is going to have a good year, honestly. But I'm just surprised that we don't have maybe like a little bit more of a resume in there. And by that, I just mean like someone who's at least gotten it done a little bit more. In the sense of he's had more carries in the league. He kind of knows what he's doing. And I know running back is kind of that position where like that doesn't really matter. You see rookies come in all the time and tear it up. But I'm just surprised that we didn't see there be more
activity.
Not to make it too top heavy, but just more in that room, given how much I feel like they're going to be leaning on it. And maybe again, this is just goes back to maybe Tony Jones Jr. is going to have more of a role in this than we thought. Maybe he's going to get like 75 carries this season. I don't know. Maybe he's going to get 50 carries and 10 targets out of the backfield. Who knows? I mean, I know we know that, Sean Payton, I'm not saying anyone on this roster is Alvin Kamara because Alvin Kamara is Alvin Kamara, right? But we know how much we like to kind of maybe have that passing out of the backfield game going in the Sean Payton offense. I mean, that's literally Alvin Kamara's that's his thing. And he's damn good at it. But it's interesting to me. I mean, maybe we see a lot more Tony Jones Jr. than I'm thinking, because otherwise, or maybe even more Tyler Beatty, because I just don't, with as much as I feel like we're going to be running the ball, I also don't see this team and Sean Payton especially being, I mean, he's too smart to be that guy that's like, yeah, I'm going to give Samaje Perine 350 carries.
Yeah.
Because we're going to go into the playoffs and he's going to be completely broken down. He's not Derrick Henry.
All right. I will say I would not be surprised if there were changes to this room. Like
I feel like once you see some camp cuts coming in at running back, you might see Tyler Beatty go to the practice squad.
That's what I was going with, in the sense of like, I think that there is a move coming to the running back room. I don't necessarily know if it's Dalvin Cook, but Kareem Hunt is still not signed. And so I think that, look, I get the off the field stuff. I get it. But I mean, you put a Kareem Hunt, the player, in a Sean Payton offense. Same with Dalvin Cook, obviously, with the pass catching and that as well. But you at least have the versatility, added to that mix, where it's a guy you can rely on, a guy that you can truly bring into this, where you may have a three-headed monster, and two, you can be afforded to keep 4 running backs. And if you feel the need to stash Javonte for a little bit to get him rested and, lessen his, workload, and so you don't, give him a lot of tread on his tires coming back from his MCL injury, like, I would not be surprised if the Broncos actually carry at the very least 4 running backs. Because
at what point do we bring Mark Ingram in here? I'm totally kidding. I know he's going to Fox, but
yeah,
he is the quintessential former Saint. I mean, he's 33 years old. Like, that's not happening, but
so
it'd be kind of funny.
Funny story about Mark Ingram. Do you know who he replaced
at Fox?
At Fox.
Don't tell me. Oh my God, who was it? Hold on.
Reggie Bush.
Damn it. I couldn't think of the name. I knew it started with an R.
During the playing days with the New Orleans Saints, Mark Ingram replaced Reggie Bush.
I know. It's funny. I couldn't think of his name for some reason. I knew it started with an R. And there's too many. It's the hard thing about sports, man. It's so hard to keep all the names straight in your head. Like, I think I read somewhere that a human being can only recognize and know like 100 names. And I already know so many people personally, and you get into rosters in multiple sports, and it's like that one guy that played at that one position at that one team in that one sport, who's now in that one booth.
So, furthering the conversation a little bit about the running backs, so you and I are probably in the same wavelength here. The Broncos will not have a 1,000-yard rusher this year. I don't think the Broncos will have a 1,000-yard rusher this year.
What'd you talk about, Willis?
Because there's a lot of mouths to feed.
Explain to yourself.
I think
there?
that
are there? We just talked about how much of a lack of rushing experience we've seen in this room. And we also just talked about how much we're going to lean on this running back room as a whole.
That's
as much as I feel like we're going to be running the ball, there's not going to be, there's some mouths to feed, but really it's a two-headed monster, if you will, between Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams, whenever he comes back. And I think there's more than enough if we're cutting down on passing as much as I think we are. I think there's more than enough for probably Javonte, but maybe even
the point
Samaje Perine to hit 1,000. I know it depends on when Javonte comes back, but I would not be surprised.
My point, though, is just that you'll see a little bit more balance between Perine and Javonte Williams in that sense. And so I think that between maybe carries or just, and again, it all depends on Javonte Williams. It all depends on Javonte Williams and the fact that he's.
You'll see more of a balance there. But if we're running the ball 600 times, one of them's getting 300, the other one's getting 300.
It's possible. Maybe that's just me being pessimistic for a second. And the Broncos have not exactly had a 1,000 rusher, for a while, right? So I can't
imagine Sean Payton comes into this and thinks, you know what, the solution to this offensive disaster that is going on in Denver right now is we need to pass the ball more, or we need to pass it as much as we've been passing. Russell Wilson had, I think, the most attempts he's ever had in his entire career, and we saw how that panned out.
My point, though, wasn't in so much you'll get the top heaviness of Samaje Perine, Javonte Williams. And if there's no change in the room, say to not adding anybody, then I think that's when you'll see guys like Tony Jones Jr. and Tyler Beatty, or even a Jaleel McLaughlin get a fair amount of the carries with this whole ground and pound offense. That there is going to be a lot of balance and feeding a lot of the backs that are in this.
You get to week 15, the playoffs are on the line. You putting Jaleel McLaughlin in there?
No. But I'm saying if you're sharing the workload with a lot of these other players, you're also
I don't think they're getting that much of a workload.
I don't think it's McLaughlin. I'm just throwing him out there.
I know. I just mean in general, I think maybe again, Tony Jones Jr., good God, gets 75 carries maybe. I still think the other two are getting.
It's just a scary proposition for me right now to say that, and in terms of predicting, if I was to predict who's going to be the 1,000-yard rusher, I don't think it's going to be Javonte Williams. And the thing is, Samaje Perine has never been a 1,000-yard rusher.
He's also never had the chance to even try to, because he's always been second fiddle. He has first legs.
And I agree with that, but I'm just saying so it's also hard to predict in that vein of will he get that 1,000 yards?
I see where your the hesitation comes in. I totally get it.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a flag on this. I'm throwing a flag on this play. I'm saying they are definitely going to have a 1,000-yard rusher, and we'll see who's right.
Okay, and again, this is just the preliminary take, I should say.
This is preliminary take for having a 1,000-yard rusher.
And that's just my preliminary take, is saying that they probably won't have 1,000-yard rusher. So we'll see. Yeah, we will definitely see. But to that same vein of the ground and pound, he threw receipts. But to that same vein of the ground and pound, it's very clearly going to be affecting Russell Wilson. It is very clearly going to affect Russ. And because of that, you will see a much better Russell Wilson in 2023. And I think you'll see a more efficient Russell Wilson in 2023. However, and this is a however, this is not to cause an alarm for people or anything like that. But I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if Jarrett Stidham is playing in a game. Don't know when, but I would not be surprised if Stidham is playing in a game.
You're saying Russ going to get injured?
No.
What other scenario? So you're saying Russ is going to get benched?
I'm just saying that, like, there's a I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm just saying.
Or you're saying that Jarrett Stidham is Taysom Hill?
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, like, in the same, like, if you look at the New Orleans Saints and the way that they had it with Jameis Winston, obviously Taysom Hill's.
That's because Jameis Winston couldn't see.
But there was a year where Jameis Winston was pretty efficient with the Saints.
Well, yeah, but that was, I mean, I feel like it's because they had Taysom Hill. Like, that's just, they have some kind of infatuation with Taysom Hill. Like, if Taysom Hill's on that roster, he's playing.
I'm just saying.
I'm surprised we haven't traded for him yet, to be honest.
I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm just saying.
If we trade for Taysom Hill, I'm with you 100%. Go ahead.
But I'm saying, like, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm just saying, like, to at least throw that out there. Like, you know, just in the vein of, like, since the Saints have played with multiple quarterbacks before, I wouldn't rule that out. That's all I'm saying. Like, I wouldn't rule it out. I really hope I'm wrong on that. And I think I am wrong.
You know what? I'll bring it back to. I can't remember what coach said this, but it was when Peyton Manning was with the Colts, and he was asked why the backup quarterback wasn't getting any snaps. If 18 goes down, we're fucked.
But anyway,
I mean, we might. I mean, I'm not saying 3 is even close to that good right now, but I don't know.
But anyway,
if he gets injured, I'm saying anything happens. But I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, we're playing our backup this year. 100% we're playing our backup this year.
Anyway,
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of teams. This is why it's important to have a good backup. A lot of teams played. I don't remember the exact stat, but like it's a surprising amount of snaps that were played by the backup quarterback last year.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I actually think we get a really good Russ, an efficient Russ, as I said, and so much so that I would, if all the Pistons are firing, I think the ceiling for Russ in terms of touchdowns is in the 35 realm.
Passing or total?
Total, I should say, 35 total. And that could be passing, and that could be even rushing. And the interceptions, I will say. Season
only?
What, for regular season? Like in terms
regular
of
season only, or in general, like including playoffs?
I'll just go regular season.
All right.
And then interceptions, if you are within that line, which is, you know, the interception totals of just a little bit under 10 or right at that 10, like 11, 10 mark, that's a really solid season. And frankly, like, you know, Russell, like in his career, he's never had, and I think if I'm not mistaken, the season that he had, which was 11 interceptions, was the most he's had in his career.
Easily.
So, and like, that's actually impressive when you look at Russell Wilson's career. The fact that it's not a Jameis Winston situation where his career was like 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions, right? You know, and something like that. So the fact that his year resulted in 11 interceptions, which was the most of his career, is actually pretty impressive. And so I wouldn't, and again, it falls sort of right in line with what it is that, you know, for his career. So I would not be surprised if he has obviously far more touchdowns. And then a little bit, you know, right around that 10 to 8 interception total. But I think the ideal prediction is somewhere within.
I've been pretty happy with that.
But I think the ideal prediction is somewhere within that vein that I've kind of have it in. is probably, the 27 to 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions.
I'm going to say 30 touchdowns and 8 interceptions.
That's still really good.
I mean, I'll take it. I'll definitely take it.
And because of the wide receivers and because of the playmakers to now tie a bow on that, I wouldn't be surprised if Russ does throw for 4,000, but it won't go anything more than 4,000.
So he's only throwing for 4,000 yards on the dot. He won't throw for 4,001.
You know what I mean? It'll be like,
he completes that extra pass to Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton gets stripped up by the turf monster. He falls backwards 3 yards. He's only thrown for 4,000 yards 4 times in his career.
Right. So I wouldn't be surprised.
4,000. I don't think he hits.
I'm not saying but I'm saying because of the playmakers and everything, I wouldn't be surprised if he did. I'm saying about 30. I will say, actually.
I mean, he throws a slant pass to Jerry Jeudy and he takes it to the house 80 yards, baby.
You know what? This is actually may sound a little bit crazy. I wouldn't be surprised if he throws for the exact same yardage that he did last year or somewhere within that same vein, which is
3,524.
Not that exact, but 3,500, 3,600, somewhere in the lines of that, maybe even 3,700. Very obviously less than 4,000, but the touchdowns are way up.
I don't know about yards. I'm not saying 4,000. I don't know exactly what he's going to get. It's definitely less than 4,000.
But I mean, to Clayton's point, and he did say it that, and I did bring it up though. They do have the receivers to do it. The thing is, though, if we are going to be going off of the ground and pound offense, then the 4,000 idea goes down.
Yeah, he's definitely not getting 4,000 yards.
Yeah.
Too many running backs.
But I think the very interesting question, though, is given the read option game and the fact that you did see some of the stuff with Taysom Hill and the fact that they utilized him in running the football. I can't predict it, but Russ will definitely be having some rushing yards sprinkled into this. So there's also part of your rushing game too, in terms of maybe not having a 1,000-yard rusher.
Put up or shut up for Russell. What kind of season does Russell Wilson have to do for Sean Payton to not move on?
I still say the solid year would be 27 to 28 and 10. He plays his butt off. And he's consistent, and he
gets 27 and 10. He's going to turn 35 at the end of the year, and Sean Payton's going to keep him.
I think if it's 27 and 10, you would almost have to 27 and 10, 28 and 10 or whatever. You'd almost would have to,
because if he does 28 touchdowns, but like 5 of those come in as game-winning drives, and we are in the playoffs, I agree with you. If he throws 28 touchdowns and we still kind of suck because he didn't get it done, we still didn't win enough, we have a decently high draft pick, see ya.
Or maybe it's the case of like we keep him, but with that draft pick is where you're drafting the investment.
Maybe.
But with the 28 and 10, 27 and 10 prediction, you almost feel like something like that banks on the idea they have to get to the playoffs in order for that to happen. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's playoffs or nothing, probably.
So, but even then, you also have to be realistic, I think, too, if you're Sean Payton, and look at it is this a quarterback that you can win in the AFC with? Because now Aaron Rodgers has been added to this mix. So now, in terms of the AFC, I think my very early season prediction is that every single team will have over 10 wins in the playoffs in the AFC. So you will have to get 10 wins to go to the playoffs.
Oh, okay.
9-8 is not going to cut
so
it.
That's tall task.
So again, and in that kind of scenario, where if you're 10 plus wins, and the Broncos are 9-8, what did that 9-8 look like for you to either keep Russ or move on from him, right? And again, did he play his butt off? Did he have those game-winning drives? Did he play really, really well and convince you otherwise for him to stay? Or did he play great but not good enough for you to keep him on? And that you can, decide to, offload the money and, move on from him, if you need to. But the fact is, though, if he is 27-10, you are looking at a much better year than you did a year ago. So it just depends on the qualifications for Peyton.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we'll have the conversation a little bit early in terms of, say, the day before training camp, or a few days before training camp. But what is one of the things that you are most looking forward to come training camp this year?
I want to see what Greg Dulcich does.
Yeah.
I also want to see how Tim Patrick comes back. And really, I want Russ to ball out. I know it's training camp, but I need Russ to go off. I'd also like to see. I'd like to see more in the trenches. I want to hear about how. I mean, honestly, this would actually make me happy, and it's going to sound weird because it kind of goes against each other. But if I hear that we're stonewalling the offensive line.
Yeah.
If I hear the offensive line is stonewalling, no one's getting through one game, and the next game the edge room is pissed, and they're like, "No, we're fucking hitting him," and they go out there and they get 4 sacks. I'm going to be pretty happy about both those things. I want to hear about the offensive line doing well, and then I want to hear about the edge room coming back and getting after it.
The other thing I want to hear, it's gonna.
I just bit my tongue when I sneezed.
So some of the Bronco fans maybe in the chat might actually kill me for this. Brandon might actually too. I hope Russell Wilson throws interceptions in practice. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at Brandon, I'm sure will come back eventually. I don't know why he dipped like that, but I think that if you look at, I said I hope that Russell Wilson throws interceptions in practice.
Get out.
No, the reason why I say that is because
you know what I hope he does.
Touchdown!
Does that the day you go?
My point, though, is if you go back and you look at all the years of when the Broncos have had quarterbacks that light up during training camp, Case Keenum being one of them, had a very efficient training camp.
Case Keenum.
It's translated into a very rocky year. So, and the interceptions, do them in camp. And also, when you are
So
in
you think
camp,
if they have a horrible camp, they're suddenly going to have a good season and vice versa?
No. The point is, like, if he's doing all these interceptions, he's testing the limits. He's testing the limits of the defense. He's testing the limits of his players. He's testing the limits of what they can do on both sides of the ball. I mean, Peyton Manning did it, right, Brandon? I mean, Peyton Manning would do something like that. And so I think that if you are able to do something like that and you're able to get them out of the way, to what Clayton just said, get them out of the way. I mean, even the case, it was the case for like Patrick Mahomes too, right? Like Patrick Mahomes was throwing interceptions left and right in training camp, right? And he goes on to have a great year. So, I mean, like, if you are truly able to look at it from the idea for Russ, he's got to get those interceptions out of the way. Because if he can get the interceptions out of the way, and he's also testing and, the limits of the defense and the playmakers and letting them be able to go out and, make those tough catches. Because those tough catches too, Russ is also helping them make the team. So, like, by stretching the field and making some of those aggressive throws, you're also allowing a player like a Brandon Johnson or, maybe a Jaleel McLaughlin on a, crazy play, like on a short yardage play or something like that. But like, even a Jalen Virgil, guys like that, you can afford on some of those plays when you do that for them to really, get the awe of the crowd and get their blood flowing in terms of excitement, for them to be like, oh, wow. Like in terms of like Jordan Taylor, right? I mean, like Jordan Taylor was a guy that, made a ridiculous catch, almost like the Odell Beckham Jr. catch. So, I mean, like those are the kinds of things like, when you can kind of, stretch and test their limits, I think it'll help both them and all the parties involved.
I'll forgive you if he throws the pick, but then he also comes back and he hits it. He comes back, he hits an 80-yard bomb. If he's a goldfish,
that's the point. That's the point. It's like it's not just a consistent. Is that it's not a consistent thing, and that it's something that they can be able to, like in 7-on-7s, you're supposed to dominate in 7-on-7s. But if and so I think that if these interceptions are coming, during say team drills and he throws an interception, but he comes right back and he leads into a scoring drive, it's exactly what you want. It's exactly what you want.
I just want him to be good. I don't care if he throws 18 picks in the camp. Just be good, please. I beg you.
So Russ is definitely one. And then in terms of throwing interceptions, you did say Greg Dulcich. I will actually go with a bit of the another obvious one. I want to see what Javonte Williams looks like. Because if it's true that he's not going to, the thing I keep coming back to with Javonte Williams is the fact that he may not start the year on the PUP list, on the physically unable to perform list.
You mean he may start the year on the PUP list?
No, he may not. That's what I heard, is that he may not start the league on the PUP list.
I mean, even if he doesn't start the year on the PUP list, though, I can't imagine that he's getting many.
It's almost like so like he may not begin the year on that, but it would almost be like we're putting you on the list without putting you on the list kind of deal, right? Like we're almost like making the decision. And obviously, Clayton brought it up. We'll get into that. We'll get into the trenches. We'll talk more about the trenches, the pass rush and stuff like that. But Randy Gregory, I mean, obviously the talk of the town with anybody you talk to. Brandon, we've had this conversation before, even with Shane Carter, a friend of the show. But like, talent is not the question for Randy Gregory. It is not the question for Randy. The question is just, can he stay on the field? And I think this is an underrated aspect for the team as a whole, not Randy Gregory. but the new health regime and the new health and wellness regime that they've installed with this team and the way that they may go about the health and nutrition and recovering from injuries and stuff like that, I think are, if you truly look at it, if there's one player that's going to benefit, and look, it's going to benefit a lot of the parties, but if there's one player that actually has the chance to benefit, it's Randy Gregory. With the amount of injuries that he's been able to sustain in his pro career already, I think, that's a good thing for him. And so if he can be able to stay healthy and put forth, a really, solid 15 to 16 or even a full season, of action, I think that is a huge win for this Denver Broncos team, because again, you put him on the field, and even in the short amount of time that he was able to play on the field this year, right, Brandon? Like, there was actually legit conversation about who was the most valuable defensive player when he was on the field in the early part of the season. Meaning, was it Pat Surtain or was it Randy Gregory? And like, there were some conversations about it actually having to be Randy Gregory. We had that conversation.
I would definitely be happy if Randy Gregory shows out. Although, I mean, one thing from the do it in camp, I want to see him do it more on the field, more consistently. But yeah, I mean, if any player balls out, I'm going to be happy. There are those specific guys that I'm looking at just individually. Like Greg Dulcich. I just really want to know what Greg Dulcich does. I want to know how they use him. I want to know what they have him do in camp, like when they're doing the team drills and they're doing the just like literally everything that they're going to be doing with Greg Dulcich on the field. I want to know what he does. I want to know, like, do they put him out wide at all? Like, do they play him? Do they have him block? Is he purely a weapon? Do they have Greg Dulcich and Chris Manhertz on the field at the same time? Like, there's so many different ways to go. They have Greg Dulcich and Alberto Cuebanam on the field at the same time. That would be wild.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say, is like, if you have Alberto and Dulcich on the field together, that would be pretty deadly, a deadly combination. And I think another one is the cornerback room. And we'll obviously talk about that as well. But the cornerback room, is Damari Mathis, separating himself potentially as that cornerback too? Because this is going to be maybe his, full second season as potentially I should say his first full season as cornerback too. So if he's able to, play really well in this training camp, you will see him solidify himself as that cornerback too. And
that's a good point. Damari Mathis, I'm really interested to see how he does.
So the cornerback room. And then, of course, K'Wan Williams. He's not going to have that brace anymore, even though he made that ridiculous interception with that brace on, that one-handed interception, with the brace that was on his hand. But K'Wan Williams is there. And I think another one that's going to be interesting is how will they use the Caden Stearns, Kareem Jackson dilemma, if you will, even PJ Locke as well. So, like, how will they use that? Because in terms of the safety room. So some of the things we may even talk about, in future episodes and stuff like that, in terms of the defensive back room, the secondary room, we'll probably talk a little bit more about that. But in terms of training camp, I'm really curious to see how they utilize Kareem Jackson and Caden Stearns, because maybe we actually may get the year where Caden Stearns is going to be a rover safety and Kareem Jackson will be, in the back with, down there with Justin Simmons. Or, I know it's given the age, but maybe you slide Kareem Jackson in as a nickel corner on certain, plays or snaps or whatever. So, I mean, I think the thing is like the Broncos are in really good position versatility-wise. J.L. Skinner, another one. J.L. Skinner, Riley Moss, just some more players that are obviously draft picks. How are they going to be able to utilize them in the secondary? So obviously the secondary with how they utilize those pieces. is something that I'm kind of intrigued with.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting. The other thing that like I'm kind of curious to know what they do, and this might be more of a, you might get like a window to it in training camp, but you're not going to really see it until the actual season starts. But like, what are they going to do with Drew Sanders? Is he going to be an inside linebacker? Is he going to be an edge? Is he going to be like that weird hybrid middle between them? Is he going to be Micah Parsons? Like, what are they going to do with Drew? What are they going to Drew?
Are they going to, Drew it up?
That's exactly how they drew it up. Yep. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for Drew Sanders to get a pick six and some of the announcer to go, that's exactly how they drew that up in training camp.
And the thing is, like, he'll say it so effortlessly, he probably won't even know that he actually said that's exactly the way he drew it up. Or
I want Drew to do it. I want Drew to come in the post-game press conference to be like, hey man, tell us about that 90-yard pick six you got. It's like, that's how we drew it up.
And then he says it.
And then he just leaves.
Or what he does is he says it's exactly the way we drew it up with a smirk on his face.
I doesn't even need the smirk. Just like deadpan. That's how we drew it up.
I'm curious about that. And given the current injury stuff with Baron Browning, how will they utilize Drew Sanders? So, it'll be really interesting. And it is going to end up being something that we are going to be following right here on the Manely Broncos podcast. And, of course, as soon as we get a little bit closer to camp, our position battles in terms of dialogue and stuff like that is going to continue. So we're going to have more conversation about this. And on the very next episode, we will have our first guest in terms of this kind of conversation. And he is a big-time guest in the Broncos podcast world. He is a host over with the Let's Talk Broncos crew, and he is 1/3 of that crew. Joey Richards at JR Drafts will be joining us on the next episode of the Manely Broncos podcast. He's a really good friend of the show. And so on our next episode, we will continue the conversation of talking more about the position groups, and we may get into the trenches, or we may even dive a little bit into, in terms of the secondary. Who knows? We haven't kind of decided that front, but we'll get you guys posted in terms of what we'll talk about. And make sure you guys like the MHRT Network Facebook page, the Manely Broncos Facebook page. Follow Brandon at Brandon Miller PO, myself at Cameron Parker PO. Clayton, thank you so much for chiming in. And Biggie Bronco, Pablo, Josh, Mr. Nobody, for chiming in. And Jorge, thank you so much for chiming in.
Bob Odenkirk? Sorry. Nobody.
D-Rock, thank you so much for chiming in as well. JC Weaver, didn't get a chance to see you, buddy. Thank you so much for chiming in. So thank you again for hopping on with us. We love all of you guys. Your comments are really beneficial to helping, bring out this show. So again, thank you guys so much. We hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, and we will see you guys next week on Wednesday.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.